Okay, so Egypt's three kingdoms. So we're going to start off with the Old Kingdom. Now, we've talked about this before. The dates that we have for our different Egyptian kingdoms are all different times. So you're going to see the circa. So a C before your date means circa, which means around, about. All right? We don't know the exact date. Until Jason lets me borrow his time machine and we go back in time, we are not going to know the exact date of the Old Kingdom. And plus, too, Egyptians often, if they didn't like their person before them, they would try to erase part of their history and chisel out dates. They would chisel, names off things. So a lot of this really early history is pretty shaky. I found a great YouTube channel that goes through like literally every dynasty of the Egyptians, and that was pretty interesting seeing what they had to say about some of this time period here. But the Old Kingdom was a prosperous time for Egypt, meaning they made a lot of money. This is one of the oldest civilizations of the world, and where we have some of the most oldest and most awesome buildings being created. The Sphinx, many pyramids, all of those things. That's the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom is the only time Egyptians were building pyramids in Egypt. Well, we're going to have the Cushites come and call themselves pharaohs, but they're going to rule Egypt, but they're not Egyptians. They're going to build some pyramids. But like I said, Egyptian pyramids, this is that time. And during this time, we're going to have the pharaohs setting up that government, like we talked about, being an absolute monarchy, meaning Pharaoh Evelyn has absolute power. What she wants is the law. Now, one of the things that they did, though, that was very interesting is each city had its own militia. The pharaoh didn't control the army back then. So we have Lexi, who's in charge of Thebes, and so she has an army. And Kirthana in charge of Memphis, and she has an army. And Jason in charge of Giza, and he has an army. Now, can anyone predict what the problem is going to be if all of these cities have their own armies? And Maddox, stop Googling answers. It doesn't do you any good, sir. All right. So what do we think the whole danger is going to be with all of these cities having their own armies, these own militias? What do you think, Kirthana?
They might attack each other.
Yeah. And they might say that they should be the pharaoh because let's face it, pyramids cost a lot of money. A ton of money. They were very expensive to build. I mean, imagine the Great Pyramid of Giza took over 20 years to build. It had millions of stones on it, thousands of workers. And the pharaoh keeps on saying, I want you to go do this. I need you to go send me more stone, more workers. So eventually, Jason says, Psst, I could do a better job than this. And we have civil war. Plus, Egypt is going to be attacked by a group of people called the Bedouins. The Bedouins lived in the Arabian Peninsula, and they're a nomadic group. And they were fine crossing the desert. So they're attacking, cities are rebelling, and what happened is the local governors, like Jason, like Kirthana, like Lexi, they were called nomarchs. And they said, we should be the pharaohs instead. So Danny says he's a pharaoh, Lexi says she's a pharaoh, Kirthana says she's a pharaoh, Jason says he's a pharaoh, Khan says everyone's saying they're pharaohs, and they wind up going and fighting and rebelling against the pharaoh, and the Old Kingdom ends. Egypt goes to war with itself. There's all these different states, and it is a huge disaster. So, from the Old Kingdom, some of the most famous are going to be Djoser, which we looked at his step pyramid the other day. We have Sneferu, who is going to have the bent pyramid built. We looked at that the other day. And we have Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, Sneferu kept on trying to build pyramids. His name means one who is made perfect. I'm not going to test you on that, but I think it's kind of interesting. And he's going to keep building pyramids. And the bent pyramid will be his best effort. But he has the dream of building that perfectly straight, smooth, awesome pyramid that Khufu is going to wind up completing. Now, let's go to our Middle Kingdom. So Egypt has about 100 years of civil war. Once again, we have circa. It is around 2055 that we think Egypt gets reunited. And we're going to have it from a guy named Mentuhotep II, and he is going to conquer all of Egypt. He was the Theban nomarch, and he goes and says, I'm going to be the boss. And here we see him in this picture here. Now, during the Middle Kingdom, we sometimes have some really small and not great pyramids being made, and some pharaohs are put in them, but they are going to be robbed immediately. And part of the reason why these pyramids are robbed is because the people who made them, the government workers who designed them, they're part of it. They say, hey, Cortez, Eliza, Adelina, you guys want to get rich? Let's go rob this pyramid we just built. Now, this probably doesn't mean much to you now, but when we start talking about Nubia next week, it is. Egypt is going to rule over the land to the south called Nubia. Nubia is the Egyptian word for gold, or land of gold. So at this point, the Egyptians are going to rule over people called the Nubians, and we're going to see that change later on next week. Now, there's going to be even more trade during this time, and Egypt is going to become even richer. What's amazing is, so Egypt is going to have this super strong, super powerful kingdom, and it's going to fall apart, but each time it comes back stronger and richer than before. And one of the great things that we're going to have at this time is a lot more art and buildings being created that aren't just tombs. For example, Senusret III is going to wind up having something called the White Chapel being created, which is going to be this beautiful white alabaster building that still stands today that was just used for people to pray. We do have Sobekneferu is going to be the last ruler of the Middle Kingdom, which is pretty cool. So we're going to see in Egyptian history, there are going to be many times that we have powerful women in charge. And this is going to be very, very unique for Egypt. Only a few other civilizations, such as China, during this kind of time period are going to ever have powerful female rulers. And don't worry, we'll get to the strong Chinese ladies when we get to China later on this year. And why does the Middle Kingdom end? Well, it ends because of an invasion, like you read yesterday. We have a group called the Hyksos. The Hyksos had the chariot. Now, think about it this way. Chariot is like the ancient version of an attack helicopter. You have Michael, who's hopefully not watching TikTok videos or YouTube and is paying attention. And he is on foot. Then you have Shania going on here. She's getting pulled by a chariot where she has a spear or bow and arrow. She's able to go super fast. And of course, the driver, Alex, he might just run over the foot soldiers like Michael. They had awesome bows and arrows. They had a really cool, the Kapesh sword, which we're going to see. They had helmets, armor, and it was made of iron. And this is going to show, or excuse me, made of bronze. And they're going to wind up just having superior weapons. And if you have better weapons, if Danny has an iron sword and Lexi has a bronze sword, guess what? Lexi's sword is going to win. Danny's sword will just break. Now, it's really interesting. So here we see that sword. It's curved like that, and it was particularly good for slicing and dicing people into multiple pieces. The Hyksos, they actually worshipped the Egyptian god Seth, the god of chaos. So we see that Egyptian mythology kind of went further than even just their own kingdom. Okay, so my cherubs, that's going to be our notes for today. I know it was kind of like a lot of overview things instead of getting into nitty-gritty stories, but I figured we need to kind of have the background, the foundation, since we haven't really talked about the kingdoms too much. So I'm going to stop recording right now. Now we have a few minutes